Hey guys, it's Xander here with Extreme History, and today we're gonna be talking about Ukraine and the conflicts going on in there. Alright, sweet. Alright, before we get started, we gotta kind of get a basis on where the Ukraine's at, things like that. Alright, so the Ukraine is a relatively large country north of the Black Sea. And recently, there's been a lot of conflict going on around there. So this Ukrainian conflict is mainly between Ukrainians and the Ukrainian government within the Ukraine, but there has been a lot of involvement from the EU and Russia in particular. The people in the Ukraine are starting to get aggressive because the government is making decisions that are driving them closer to a Russian kind of government instead of a Western Europe type of EU government like most of them want. One of the biggest contributors to this conflict is the former president of the Ukraine. His name is Viktor Yanukovych, something like that. Alright, here's a picture of Viktor Yanukovych. A lot of people don't like him in the Ukraine. Alright, I'd say the reason why so many people hate him right now is because he was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. He denied a deal with the EU that would have helped bail them out and instead tried to accept one from Russia. A lot of people disagree with that. Because of many of his decisions that he made, people started to revolt, things started getting violent, and yeah, eventually sanctions were actually placed on Russia because they were getting a little bit too close to the Ukraine. I guess that happens when you're Russian to get close to Russia. So these sanctions that Russia got put on them were kind of focused on the higher power people that were living in Russia. They said these three major things. They said Russian states are excluded from long-term loans. Some military things were banned. There were some bans on some oil industry technology. However, gas was pretty much unaffected by the sanctions. So, because of all these crazy things that were happening, on February 18th, 2014, the capital city of Ukraine, Kiev, was stormed by protesters. It caused the president to flee. So, some crazy stuff going on. This storming of the city happened almost immediately after the denial of the EU bill. Alright, so in order to kind of understand why there's so much going on and like almost two exactly opposite people here, is that because Ukraine is kind of like a melting pot, like America kind of is. America. So they had people from all over the world kind of coming in together because they sit in the middle. They got people coming up from Africa, from the east on the Mongols. Got some coming from Scandinavia, Asia. I mean, you name it. They got people coming in from there. So, taking a step backwards for a second, the deal that Russia proposed to them was a little bit different compared to the EU one. Many people argued that it seemed a little bit too good to be true. So the two major points of this deal was that Russia offered to pay $15 billion to Ukraine to get them out of debt. And then on top of that, they also were going to lower the amount of money it costs for the Ukraine to buy goods from them to like a third of the price. Again, many people saw this as problematic because it was driving them away from the EU and closer to Russia. Alright, now I'm going to come at you at a little bit more of a historical point of view of this conflict. The reason that the Ukraine was so strong and important was because of their geographical location, right? Many people, including the Greeks and the Romans, Ottomans, and other different cultures from Europe, incorporated the Ukraine into their civilizations, because connected to ports or things like that. It was just a strategic decision to do something like that. I just mentioned ports, and ports were extremely important throughout the Ukraine because of since it was connected to the Black Sea, it could connect many different things. Like it could connect Europe and Africa and Asia. More importantly, something that was very strategic for the Russians. Russians wanted to take over Ukraine because their ports in the Black Sea wouldn't freeze. Like, for example, Russian ports would always freeze, whereas in Ukraine, these ports wouldn't freeze. It was a little bit more warmer climate, which is very important for the Russians. Notice how I said that the ports were important. Got him. That's what you gotta say, right? Like I said, many of these people would move in to the Ukraine just because of its geographic location and how many people live there. So there are so many cultures blending there with so many different opinions and beliefs from where their homeland was. It was just kind of like a jumbled mess. It still is. So there were four major groups of people that moved into Ukraine. From the north, we had the Vikings with their Scandinavian influences and their belief system. From the south, we had missionaries. So they had a little bit more of a religious influence on the Ukraine. Coming in from the east, from Inner Asia, the Scythians and Turkish people would come in, kind of mess about this melting pot, and the Tatars came in. And there's one thing we cannot forget: there are no exceptions to this rule. Not even the Mongols. Got him, coach. At this point, you're probably already fed up with me in this video. But there's just one more point I gotta mention, and that's about religion. Religion on this topic could be one of the most important things. A lot of people kind of overlook it when they're looking at the Ukrainian conflict, but it played its part in this thing. Alright, so why religion was so important? There were two sides, just kind of like there's two sides of the conflict going on. There was the Ukrainian Greek church and the Moscow-based church. This Ukrainian Greek church is like it sounds. It was a church of Ukraine. Their main goal was to focus on keeping the language, culture of Ukraine kind of similar. They really, really, really didn't want it to go into the Russian culture. And Mr. Nicholas Vedik said that the church was even used to counterweight the amount of Russian influence that was being put on the Ukraine. Now, on the other hand, this Moscow-based church, it was from Russia, and Vladimir Putin actually tried to manipulate this church to kind of bring more influences into Ukraine, and they also use it as a form of propaganda. Alright, as we saw with religion specifically, there's twos everywhere throughout this conflict. There's two groups, two religions. I mean, there's everywhere. So there's like a definite cut between the East and the West, especially when it comes to Ukraine. On the East, we have Russian supporters. We have the Moscow Church. On the West, we have pro-EU, pro-Europe, pro-America. They have a lot more of those European influences. They don't speak as Russian as much over on that side of the country. So there are definitely these two separate pieces of the country going on right here. Here's just a visual on how this country is being split. This is between Russian and non-Russian. Alright, so in conclusion, there are these two big sides of the EU versus Russia, and they're both duking it out, kind of not necessarily in an aggressive way, but more like a verbal communication way through Ukraine. And Ukraine is kind of being torn apart by these two people. So Ukraine is trying to revolt, and if nothing happens to stop this, the Ukraine could be split apart, maybe like something North Korea and South Korea. We got to stop this before anything bad can happen. So thank you guys very much.